Thank you all for being here. Good morning. It's still before noon. This panel is slightly different, and then I would try to be a little bit bold. And unless you're taking notes or taking pictures to share across your social media presence, let's put the phones down, because the experience and knowledge that you're going to witness on this stage is wrapped up in decades across a variety of industries, in multi-billion-dollar industries, and it's something that we can all learn from. So, igniting leadership. It's impossible in today's world to do that without those two words that we've been hearing about for the last 3 years everywhere, AI, right? We're going to use that same acronym here, but it's not going to be artificial intelligence. It's going to be actual intelligence by our panelists and colleagues that we have to my left, your right. As we begin, I would like to ask each of the panelists, and maybe we can start with Sarah and work way across, to share some highlights as to why tech? You know, I know when I was starting, they told me, pick tech, it'll be fun. I'm still looking for those people. But why tech? How did you pick that career, that journey, or did it pick you? And maybe a little bit of context about your current role and responsibilities.
Yeah, sure. So hello. Thanks for joining us today. Despite what the board may say, there needs to be an S in there. So I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for US Foods. And I would say tech chose me by accident, probably, because I haven't done a lot of coding. But I was a math major in undergrad, and I graduated shortly after 9/11, when the NSA was hiring a lot of mathematicians to solve whatever happened on that day, and to find a different type of bad guy. So I joined the NSA and learned deep on the inside what national assurance meant, and information assurance and national security, and then have been in cyber ever since.
Cool. Mine probably started as a kid. I was a musician, and so I was interested in sound and audio and wanted to go into music production. And then I also loved to dismantle my car and upgrade the car stereo. Mm-hmm. And I would relentlessly find little ways to tweak that. And so when I went to college, it was electrical engineering. Never in a million years did I think I would wind up in this field of computers at the time. My roommate was a computer scientist, and I thought they were all kind of nerdy. Not that electrical engineers aren't very nerdy, but that was just the beginning of it, and then I wound up getting into software, and then software leads you into a different path. And so for me, it was always going to be about technology. I don't think I would have guessed it was about information technology and some of those things, but careers just kind of wind their ways through, doors open, and you walk through, and you go from electrical engineer to a CIO of a healthcare institution. I don't know if I would have predicted that in 1,000 iterations of my career when I was starting out, but that's the way these things go.
When you mentioned car stereos and cars, it brought me to my childhood in Jersey, but it was in a different context.
Probably
so different way.
I might have bought some equipment.
Different way.
Yeah.
I actually started out in radio, TV, and film. Now, as a farm girl, I was always taking things apart. At my grandpa's shop. One day I took apart my mom's toaster. That didn't go over so well for me, so then I was relegated to only working in the shop. But I went to school for radio, TV, and film. I was working as a TV news producer in a little town called Terre Haute, Indiana. And all of a sudden, the first Apple laptop came out, and I was done. It was over. I no longer wanted to be, Jane Pauley at in NBC. I wanted to rip that thing apart and figure out how it worked. And then, needless to say, that's the rest of the story, is how I went into tech.
Another very untraditional path for me as well. I actually started in retail operations, and I got my first big leadership job out of college. Have grown up in retail my entire career and fell into technology because I always loved to play right in between the role of how do you operationalize tech, and I got to do I was lucky enough to say yes to a couple of great projects that allowed me to get my hands closer to the tech and really understand how operators make technology work for them. And that really led me down a couple of different paths of product development, product strategy, and about 18 months ago, I said yes to another great opportunity and came to Grand Rapids and started my career with Meyer. So very lucky to have had opportunities to say yes, but I mean, really, that's kind of how your career works, right? You just say yes and you go and gain as much as you can from that experience.
As you can see from the opening comments, the first lesson is already evident, and that is being self-aware of your interests and capabilities, and also being courageous and brave enough to say yes to some unknown paths, maybe things you haven't walked in the past. Because what's the worst thing that could happen? You fail. We all fail, and you do it again. On that same kind of thread and line of thought, Sarah, as we were kind of preparing for the panel, you shared some of your experiences, how you have raised your hand. I don't know if it was raised for you, but you've raised your hand to get more actively engaged in leading business continuity. Can you tell us a little bit about how does a Chief Information Security Officer depart from maybe some of the traditional lanes that you have been accustomed to swimming in?
Yeah, I think business continuity for me was kind of achieve two goals. The first is when I joined the organization and I ran my first tabletop, and I felt good about having an idea of what the company would do to respond to a ransomware attack. What was also incredibly evident was that the company didn't know what to do to keep the business running while we worked through negotiations and responded to a ransomware attack. So that actually made me pretty anxious, because if you think about the weight of preventing a cyber attack when the business doesn't know how to keep running, seemed pretty terrifying. And then second, I'd been in cyber, like I mentioned earlier, my whole career. That's all I've ever done. And so I needed, if I wanted to move up or to move into something more, I needed an opportunity to say I can do more than just cyber. And so when I recognized that gap, I said, this is something I want to solve for the organization. And I also like your comment, Milos, about failure. If I failed, no one had that high expectations of me anyway, because I had never done it before. And so they were hoping that I succeeded, but if it didn't work, they'd be like, yeah, we tried, and we'd move on to the next thing. And so I think it's certainly raising your hand and being prepared to fail if that's the way you go, but also surround yourself with good people to prevent failure.
Yep. Any other relatable comments on your engagements and kind of in business continuity and maybe expanding your reach and influence and contributions?
I'll just comment, in healthcare, we talk about business continuity a lot, right? We're a 24/7 operation, and, when we have things go bump in the night, people can get hurt. So we're very sensitive to that. We've had a couple of events. We had an event, it was probably 2 years ago now, where we actually lost a core piece of technology in one of our data centers, and we went very, 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 very dark for a number of hours. Thankfully, it was not cyber related, and we were able to repair and get things back online. But that experience demonstrated how reliant we were as an operation on technology when all of it fails at once, right? When one piece fails, people kind of hold their breath and hope for it to come back. When it's all gone, you realize there's different muscles. And so we kind of launched a program with kind of the prodding of our board in this process to make sure that our operators knew how to survive in a lengthy kind of disruption. I think that's probably going to become more commonplace in other industries as well, as people think about, it's not a matter of if, but when something bad is going to happen, and we have to be as prepared operationally as we are trying to prevent it in the first place from a technical perspective. So.
Yeah, the dependencies on technology, they're just so deep and vast, right? And so I think that the other comment I would make is vendor dependencies, right? So we are just so immersed in this now ecosystem of, it's not just what you can control, but you have the dependencies on your partners. And so I think that relationship with your partners is so important, even more important today than it has ever been, in understanding what does business continuity look like for them, and do they understand your business, and how are they going to respond when it happens, not if, but when.
Right. That's very interesting. So clearly Control-Alt-Delete or good old kick didn't work for you, Jason. But Erin, you just mentioned partnerships, vendors, dependencies. Mm-hmm. I'm interested, maybe Anita, we can start with you. When you are looking into those truly transformational strategic partnerships where organizations are going and this is helpful to a lot of people in this room, where people are not, or CIOs and CISOs are not looking for transactional, you sell me a widget, you sign a 3-year deal, then you walk away for 2.5, then it's time to renew, you come back. We've all seen that, we've all experienced it. What are some of the kind of components or attributes that you look for in those current vendors that could prospectively become your partners?
We look for a couple things. One is, do they come to the table with solutions? And that's very critical for us. If you want to be a partner, you're going to come, you're going to show us how your product works, how your platform performs, how it can improve us. You're going to do a proof of concept for free, because that's my favorite word. I think most of you who know me know that.
Agreed.
And then we're going to go from there. But you're going to have strong SLAs, service level. You're going to tell me what's going to happen when your product fails. And then we're going to practice that so we can look at that failover concept and make sure that we can get up and running as quickly as possible. Now, we're not as critical. If something goes down in our systems, we're not going to, pizza, they might die if they don't get it. But it is still critical that we have that relationship. So for example, we have a very strong relationship with Microsoft. And believe it or not, Super Bowl is not our biggest day. It's actually, sadly, Halloween. Halloween is great, and then even second is Valentine's Day. But for Super Bowl and those big days, that vendor is on site with us because they're a partner. So they are there. We're all watching the screens, watching the traffic go up and down, and we know if this particular segment starts poor performing, we're going to switch. So we have all of that planned out. Now, if a lot of times someone who just wants to come in and sell us their little widget, if they don't have that, they're not going to make it. And when we were building our cloud platform, we did a bake-off between Microsoft and another vendor, and the other vendor wanted to be a partner, or wanted to be a vendor and not a partner. And they didn't come to the table with everything they needed to. So even though it was more expensive, Microsoft got our business because they wanted that strong partnership with us.
I think it's really helpful, and it's as if we rehearsed this, but there's a lot of questions that are happening here ad hoc. Because I think that's how you get the best content, and these folks are such titans of their industries that they are past the years of being stumped by someone like me asking them a question. What's really interesting, Anita, what you just talked about is how important it is to prepare and plan and rehearse, right? At one time, undisputed boxing champion Mike Tyson was credited with the sentence that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Jason, I may have heard from you in the past, recent past, that you've had some practical experiences that you can share when you are in the midst of, in the 11th hour of a major enterprise transformational system integration and launch, when yet another event occurs and instills panic and fear and doubt. What happened? And how did you lead through those turbulent times?
So Corewell Health is the combination of Spectrum Health, Lakeland Health down in St. Joseph, and Beaumont Health on the east side of the state. Part of our strategy when we brought those organizations together was to standardize across the board on all of our technology, which includes everything from network security, ERP, Workday, Microsoft 365, that whole stack. And the last piece of that is really our EHR Epic, which is our core program. That was about a 2-year program in the making. And just to give you a sense of when you go live with these things, you're talking about tens of thousands of users, massive transformation, 8 hospitals all live midnight on a Saturday, and then 2 days of really just cleaning up and making sure people know how to enter orders and keep patients safe. Once that process starts, we actually put all of our new schedules and everything in the new system starting on Monday morning, as you can imagine, with the anticipation that will be the new system. So it's very hard to not go live once you say you're going to go live. Friday morning before that is when that CrowdStrike thing happened. Anybody familiar with CrowdStrike? So I woke up at 4:30 to a call on Friday morning from my CISO saying, just want to let you know it's not a cyber incident. I'm like, because that's heart attack. Thank you for saying that. However, all of our computers are down. Everything's blue screen. And I was like, okay, you're up. You're not sleeping anymore. And so we scrambled for about 12 hours to pull everybody on deck and try to figure it out. The problem was the majority of our team needed to start the procedures to go live on that night. So we had about 12 hours of everybody, and then we had to make a call whether we split the team, and that team was gonna go with the go live procedures, and the rest of the team was gonna try to save the fact that we had no computers to go live on. And so we had everybody from the president of the regions to the doctors who were there and nurses and IT people all running around with USB keys, putting BitLocker things in to recycle those computers and get them out of their blue screen mode. It was terrifying. But probably the most terrifying moment was about 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon where we had to make the go, no-go call. And as we were looking at this situation, it's like, well, so far we've got 100 of our 42,000 computers back online. But we need to make a call as to whether we're gonna actually go live. And we said, you know what, we just gotta trust that we can get there. And so it was a very interesting exercise in organizational people coming together and knowing their role. It was dicey. I mean, the people were like, we need to run this script and I don't have a server. Get these servers online, and we were triaging kind of in real time what needed to happen. So it was, to say it was a harrowing weekend would be an understatement, but it was also really a great weekend that really shows the spirit of what people can do when they're tasked with something that seems impossible in the moment.
Could you add just a little bit more context to, because you acknowledging that it was terrifying, absolutely understandable, but also how important it is for you to get on those calls and walk into some of those rooms and display calmness and presence and confidence in your team and the process and the journey you've been on.
Well, there was a lot of heated people on the call, especially as we got later in the day. Sempers were like, what do you mean we're not there yet? Where are those USB keys? Who's gonna hit this? But it was kind of just saying, look, guys, one step at a time and go through it. I did say in the moment, I said, I'm gonna write a book about this. It's either gonna be the biggest disaster book ever, or it's gonna be a very inspiring book ever. And I actually said that to the team. I said, what book are we writing right now about this whole situation? And it did help. And honestly, healthcare does have a lot of people who do tend to be calmer under pressure. I don't know why people are drawn to that. But when that happens, it's almost like everybody turns into the best version of themselves. And it definitely was important to do that and to calm those situations where it did get a little bit testy. But for the most part, I think people knew their jobs and knew what they had to do. And I don't recommend it to anybody.
But I think as a leader, that's critical. Our job is to be calm, right? If you're yelling at people, they're not going to work any harder for you. They're now just frightened, to be honest.
It's actually the opposite, because other people will be yelling at them.
Yes, but even that, as a leader, that's your job to say stop. And you have to have that courage to say, I need you to stop. You and I can go into another room, or I can get my people off the phone, but we're not going to have that tone in this meeting right now. And that's, as a leader, sometimes that is frightening, and you're shaking in your boots when you say it, especially if it's a CEO. I fortunately don't have that problem anymore, but I have had it. But that's our role. If you're a servant leader, your role is to make sure that your team has everything, all the tools, the support, the emotional support to get the job done. And you have to take all the hits.
Yep.
That's part of it.
The willingness and courage to redirect that target and place it on your own back.
Yep.
And I said, if it's gonna make you feel better to, wring someone's neck, start with me. And to provide that air cover to your team. Now, depending on what happened, if some of these were self-inflicted wounds, you have those conversations with radical candor behind closed doors, but publicly you always have to protect your team and make sure that
So let me just share one really incredible story. So all of this is happening, then it was like the airlines were down, like Delta was down, and we had thousands of people. We had every hotel in Southeast Michigan booked that day. Every hotel was then empty because nobody was in town because they couldn't get there because of the airlines. So we had people kind of trickling in slowly. And about midnight, we were way behind on order entry. We had to manually go take every patient that was in the hospital and put all their stuff into the new system. And we put a call out for a group of nurses, just said, anybody who can do this. After working a 12-hour shift, we had this group of nurses roll into our command center at like 11 p.m., walked in with backpacks and said, how can I help? They'd already walked into, so that's like, when you think about like the spirit of healthcare people, right? They were like, I'm not tired, like we're gonna get this done. And that, I think, exhibits how people can actually lead at every level of the organization. I mean, that was leadership. Those people inspired other people then to come and do this kind of thing, which I think is pretty impressive when you think about it.
That's huge. As we all know, leadership is a set of actions and attributes that influence, not a corner office title position that one holds. I've met a lot of people in leadership positions who wouldn't recognize a leader if it walked right past them. And I've also worked with some remarkable ones. But what you're touching on now, and I would love to hear from Sarah, the importance of clarity, communication, engagement, but also that mission and purpose and organizational culture. Because, you know, as Peter Drucker was credited saying that organizational culture eats strategy for breakfast. Could you share some of the context in your organization, maybe an experience or two, where that organizational culture showed up in hopefully more frequently a positive way that have provided other opportunities?
Yeah, I think in the cyberspace, maybe even similar to healthcare, when we do have a cyber crisis, I think most cyber folks are like, we've trained for this our whole lives. Like we've been preparing for this day, and you really see your cyber team and your technology teams and everyone kind of step up because that's their moment, not just to shine, but their moment to say, I've trained for this, I've studied for this, like I am prepared to protect my organization. And so I love that culture about every security team that I've worked on. They all kind of rally around it. Sometimes that can mean lots of things are being said publicly that maybe shouldn't be said publicly. And so when you talk about clarity and communication, there is a bit of like practicing and understanding roles and responsibilities, because if you have a major crisis, I can't be the only one communicating out. I'm going to need to rely on a handful of other people to take various different communication roles. If I'm talking with my executives, if I'm meeting with my board, I've got other people meeting with customers and taking calls from the sales team and so on. And they're all trying to do the right thing. And so it's getting that group of people to have a consistent message, calm, be calm. I think that's one of the most important things that, whether it's myself or anyone communicating on behalf of the organization, has to stay calm and also not lie, right? Like we have to, if we don't know the answer, if I don't know when the system's going to be back up again, I shouldn't say in 2 hours, right? We can't make it up along the way. We have to be clear with what we know and clear with what we don't know as we communicate. And I also say, I love the analogy of, every good plan is great until you get punched in the face. But we do try to practice. We do try to practice things so you kind of can have a plan. And I have a little communication schedule with my team of like, okay, if this happens, I'm gonna tell the CEO, and then I'm gonna tell the board. And if this happens, okay, number 2, you're gonna go do this, and you're gonna go do that. And it's not scripted, but at least we have a baseline understanding of who's gonna go do what and when, so that if, when things do get off the rails, we can try to rally around at least a baseline.
You mentioned, board communication, engagement, placement of technology, both infrastructure and services, and its value, which I think it's evident by the to everyone who's up and awake in today's world, continues to grow at an exponential pace. Wondering from your perspective, Erin, how does technology contribute to your overall customer services and your customer experience, and where do you see opportunities for them to maybe execute some of the vision and strategy decisions that were made versus partner with you in creating and designing that experience from the beginning?
With respect to infrastructure partners?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's the backbone of retail technology, which is what I lead. If a data center goes down, if firewall goes down, I mean, there's no daylight between my infrastructure partners and my team, right? And yes, we are different teams and we have different skill sets, but we have to work together. And so it is 100% important that they see them as not just critical partners, but part of the team. And so that is something that I emphasize with my leaders is how do you understand what their priorities are? How do you make sure that we have connected our priorities to theirs? And there really is no daylight. So I'm in the middle of a pretty big transformation at the front end of the store. And I need to make sure that they are along that journey. So they have the same expectations as my leaders of building the relationship with our third parties, of understanding what the business functionality looks like and what capabilities we need to deliver and when. And so those timelines, those conversations are completely in sync. So from a strategy perspective, they are along the journey with us. They're at the front end of the strategy with us and helping us understand what are some of the pitfalls that we're not seeing or what are some of the questions that we're not asking. So I see them as, absolutely critical partners in getting this right for Meijer. So,
And for both you and then Anita, that unified partnership of your internal team and external partners, how does that thread internally when it comes to the strategy setting for the organization itself? Because we all worked on teams where, no pun intended, especially since we have someone from Little Caesars, but we've all worked on teams where IT was looked at as an organization in the basement where we slide a pizza box once a week underneath just to make sure they're still alive because we need them. And those days of how things that were looked at in the 90s when I started are long gone in most organizations, if not all, I hope. From your perspectives, each of your perspectives, how do you see technology have that right seat at the table in setting the organizational priorities and strategy?
Yeah, I'm lucky to work for an organization that is very much realizing quickly that it's paramount to the success of the company, that we are at the front end of strategy and we can help facilitate those critical conversations from go. From the very moment we are, voicing the expectation out into the ether, we want to make sure that we have a seat at the table. So I think it's all about value. So how I am pushing my leaders to think about continuing to voice their needed presence at the table is state your value up front. Help them understand what you bring to the table from the very first thing you say. And connecting it back to what's in it for them, right? What is important to them and how you understand their vision is really your vision. So I think connecting everything back to value is so important, and it really is the same common language we should all be speaking.
I would agree with that. Establishing your business value as well as go out and learn that business, building that relationship. When I first walked into Little Caesars, the system went down for every day, for hours at a time. The help desk was referred to as a helpless desk, and it was having to work really hard to learn the business, to build the trust. And I would look at the team and say, I can't code anymore unless it's Fox Pro, and I could probably do it, and they all laugh or ask, what's that? But you guys have to understand what the business needs. You need to hit your date. If you make a commitment, you better hit it, because that's the only way you're going to build that credibility back up. All of our IT folks spend at least 5 days a year in the restaurants, looking at how that tech is utilized, understanding when they come back, it helps them say, as they're coding or thinking about new hardware or creating the platform backups, that, oh, this is going to be too much for that 16-year-old high school student to know how to do all these steps to reset the system or install something. And so by really working hard for our IT folks to understand the business, creating that really good relationship with the business, explaining what our value is, got us the seat at the table. And we're a profit center, so they look at our IT to make money And so being at the table when everything has a technology component it's critical. So.
And with that in mind, Jason, if you can briefly share some of your thoughts, which I know you have, on being intentional of how technology is funded in organizations in order to be able to achieve those goals.
Yeah, so when we created our new system, one of the first discussions we had is what is our plan? I mean, this was really early, and the first step was to get our leadership team and then our board on the same page and understand. We put forward what we called our enterprise technology plan, which was at the time a 3-year plan to modernize and integrate all the things at once. And everybody's like, that's a lot. And it was a little bit shock and awe. But at the same time, like, organizations have ADD. Like, after about 2 or 3 years, you forget what you're trying to do. And we knew we needed to come fast and furious and get this stuff done, but it was 1,000% aligned to all the goals we had as an organization, right? We needed to become, more integrated. We wanted to provide higher standard of care that was consistent everywhere you went, and you just can't do that in 2025 without technology at the backbone of everything. It's what's expected. And so that was, thankfully, an easy conversation for the most part. I mean, there was some, canoodling here and there that needed to happen, but for the most part, it was people were aligned with that vision, and then we put the plan in place, and then we didn't have to talk about it. It was like, this is our plan. I think when you do it, it's, in small pieces, it's actually harder because people question every step. And these are not things that you can do one step at a time. I actually drew this diagram on the board I called the fish diagram. It's like the cost of something goes up and then it comes down, and the experience comes down and before it goes up. And until you get to that point where those two lines cross, it sucks. It's like, it's costing me more and the experience isn't that great. So as soon as you got to get past that point of inflection where the technology is integrated and functioning and your costs are low. But you got to do that as quickly as possible. The longer you spend in that middle time, the more opportunity people have for questioning the strategy, doubling down, key leaders leave, whatever happens. So that was our strategy, and we continue to kind of run that in like 2 to 3 year tranches, and it seems to be pretty effective.
And as we close, I would love to start with Sarah and work our way back towards me with one of, I'm sure each of you have countless examples and advice. But if you were to leave one piece of advice that those who aspire to higher growth and professional development and perhaps positions that all of you hold today, what's that one thing that they should be mindful of, think about, or act on as they move forward?
Picking one is really hard, but I'll go with something that's been really beneficial for me throughout my whole career, and that's just go out and make friends with your infrastructure partner, with your HR partner, with your supply chain officer, with your vendors. You need those relationships to be successful, and then you want those people to be also your supporter in your journey, right? My business partners want to see me be successful in this job. And so they partner with me better, and they are behind me 100% of the way whenever I'm doing something that they might even question, which happens regularly. So I would encourage you to go make friends with the rest of your organization.
So, going back to my example, I would say from a leadership perspective, I think humility. So many times you see leaders who want to be a leader because they want to lead. And I think leaders first need to gut check themselves and say, why am I here and who am I serving? And in the example I gave about our big crazy weekend, my job was to set the tone, make the really hard decision that I could have gotten fired for, because everything in our playbook says stop the go live. Why would we keep going? Well, we had the instinct that was going to be far better, but it was more about getting the right leaders across the organization to know their role, encouraging them and setting the framework. And if those leaders didn't have the right mindset on how to make the decisions in the moment, the whole thing wouldn't have gone well. And so for me, when I'm looking at my team, I always emphasize that. It's like, if you can come to work every day and be curious and emphasize humility, you're going to be set up to be a good leader because people are going to follow you and you're going to be able to learn and grow. And that's what it's all about.
In addition to those are really great. I think just making sure you're learning that business so you can offer value to that business person in your organization. It says, how can I help? What problem are you having? How can I help you? Or here's a solution that might work for you. And as you build that, then you become that go-to person for them, and that increases your business value to the overall organization.
I think the only thing I would add is always be listening and really hear people. I think my biggest litmus test throughout the week as to whether or not like I'm doing a good job as a leader is like how many people are just walking through my office door unexpectedly and having conversations with me, and how do I create kind of that environment of trust and authenticity for them to just come and talk to me. I want to know the things. We are better off for having just said the things to each other, and I think that is something I'm always trying to work on as a leader is how do I create that environment so people feel safe to come and say the thing. So I think always listening is really important.
Learn the business you're in, make friends, listen to those people, and do it with humility. Thank you all very much, and please join me in thanking our panelists.